Hey guys, this is Ascii and it is Tech Time. Today we're going to introduce members and class members from C++, such as integers, doubles, floats, and characters and strings, but I'm not going to go into strings too far because they have functions inside them and I'll show you that later. So let's go ahead and start our project, our solution, and let's launch our Microsoft Visual Studio. Go ahead to the start and type Visual. You'll see it right away, Visual Studio. So let's launch that. After we have done that, we will need a new project. So go ahead and click on that and select Visual C++. If you don't find that, you will find it in other languages. So go ahead and click on Visual C++ and then empty project and name it. I'm going to name mine member intro, and I'm going to set it in the C++ folder and go ahead and press OK. It will create the whole solution for you right here. So go ahead and right click on source files and add a new item, and click on C++ file and call it main as we did before. After that, let's go ahead and do the skeleton that we've talked about before. Include IO stream to let us use input and output, using name space std for standard, and void main, and that is our skeleton. So before introducing anything, int stands for integer, and integers are numbers, a whole number, not a 1.1 or 1.2, just 1, 2, 3, and so on. So it includes all negative numbers, zeros, and ones, and one in all positive numbers. So to type an integer, you have to type int, which stands for integer, and it is highlighted in blue because it's a class and it's a reserved word by Microsoft, so you cannot use it for anything else. So one of the common errors I'll introduce you to is people do int and then type 0 and semicolon, expecting it to be a 0. You cannot do that because it will give you an error, and it is expecting an identifier. To identify it, you have to give it a name, a member name. So you can do num1. What you cannot do is 1num, because it will give you an error, because you cannot put numbers in the start. You have to do words, characters. So there are a bunch of ways of doing identification, and you cannot put space. You do num and then space and then type 1. You cannot put spaces in between them. It has to be a whole word. Well, if you want to put spaces, put an underscore and do 1. And the most common style is the camel style, which is num1. It's called camel style because the first letter is all small, and then second word there's a hump, capital letter, and then all small. So we're going to use num1 like that, or like that. I'll work with that. I like capitals, so we're gonna put it like this. So second thing is initialization, and just picture initialization as when you count on your fingers, you have to count from 1. But why do you count from 1? Why can't you count from 3? Start with first finger of 3. So in your mind, you're initializing your first number to be 1, because without counting it's 0. So we have to set this identification of the member to 0, because otherwise it will be a garbage, a number in the memory of the processor, just a garbage. To show you the error, we're going to display it, which is cout, and like you add anything, to double less than, and then type num1, which will look at this and see what's inside it and display it. So put a semicolon and compile it by going to debug, start without debugging, click that. It will give you an error, debug error. You can read these errors, don't worry about this, but worry about this. runtime check failure number 3, the variable num1, so it tells you what variable it is being used without being initialized, so it tells you what is the problem. So go ahead and click abort. So we have to initialize it. To initialize it, you do equal 0, that is all. Just like in your mind, without thinking about it, it just equals to 0. So you do the same thing in here. So let's go ahead and compile it now. Debug, start without debugging, and we don't have a system pause, so let's do system pause and let's run it. You can see that there's a 0 right here. It displayed whatever is in there. So let's go back, and I'm going to add an end line right here so we can see it better. You can initialize this to whatever number you want. You can initialize it to 5 and it will still run normally without any problems, displaying 5. So now that we have initialized this one to 5, maybe we want to create another integer. So that's no problem. We can go ahead and create another integer by doing comma, space, and giving another member identification, a variable identification, which is num2, let's say, equals to 1, let's say. Let's say this one is 0, this one is 0, and this one is 1. So now we have 2 of them. If we want to create a third one, do the exact same thing, comma, give a identification, and then equals to 2, whatever you want, or you can make it equal to 1 or 0, whatever you want. Usually always make sure that it's 0, so I'm gonna make them all 0 just because we start counting from 0. And to display them, we can do double less thans, and then num2, and double less thans num3, and that would be fine. And to add spaces between them, as we've talked before, you have to do double less than, so double less than, double quotes, space, double quotes. That is a space. So let's go ahead and add a space between those two, and let's run it. Control F5, and you have 0, 0, 0. What happened is the cout is console out, so it looks at num1, it sees that num1 is equal to 0, so I will display 0. Same thing with this, same thing with this, and so on. So we are done with integers, and I don't remember anything else that we need from it. So let's go ahead and do, why don't I show you cin. So cin is input, which is cin, and double higher than, just exactly like cout, but double higher than, and you can do num1 semicolon. But you cannot do this. You cannot do that because it's only for input. So, and that is an output. All this is an output. So what we need to do is copy it and put it in a cout like that, and put a semicolon, and you'll be just fine with that. You can also do after it, right in here, we can do cout number 2, just like that. And we can do cin again, which is cin, double higher than, and then num2. And then for the third one, we can do the same thing for the output. It's not much different because it's all the same. And the cin, we can do num3, and that is it. Just make sure that you type it letter for letter the same, and the output will be right here. So let's go ahead and put end lines. I almost forgot about that. End line right here, and end line right here, and end line right here. Let's let's go ahead and compile it. Debug, start without debugging, and run it. So it asks you, please input num1, so let's go ahead and put 1. Please input num2, let's do 5. please input num3. Let's do 6, and the numbers are 1 for num1, 5 for num2, 6 for num3, just like we have done for the input. So let's go ahead and close that, and I'm going to comment this out for now and go above it. So the next thing I'm going to introduce is doubles. Doubles are not much different than integers. You type them as they are. Double is a double. It will be highlighted in blue, as I said before. It's a reserved word, and you have to do the same thing as integers. You have to give it a name. So let's say d num1 equals. Now this is the difference. The reason it's called doubles is because it's a huge number. This is the kind of number they count Bill Gates' money, because it's very huge. So the difference between it and int is you can do 0.0. That is the only way to initialize it. Or you can do 0.1 or 1.1, any number, as long as there is a point between them. 0.0, and that looks good. So to add more doubles, we can do comma d num2 comma d num3, and let's initialize them to 0.0, and same thing with this one, 0.0. So you can see that there aren't many differences except for the initialization and the calling. And to display them, I'm going to do the same thing for this code. Let's go ahead and uncomment it right here if you want, and let's go ahead and change just a few things. Put a D right here, put a D right here, same thing here, same thing here, and in all of these, D, D, and D. So let's go ahead and run it. I apologize, I run it in the debugging, and I wasn't supposed to do that, but in my job I have to deal with that a lot, with students doing that, so I got used to it. But don't do that. Let's go ahead and change that. Let's go ahead to compiler, and in the dnum1, let's go ahead and put an input. You can put 1 just fine, and you can put 1.1 and it won't give you an error. You can put 3.1, won't give you an error, and it will display them. But this is really a 0.99, I believe. I will show you that because I can show it from here. Let's go ahead and close this and this and this. You probably won't have this on, so let's go ahead and close this. I'll show you what's inside these doubles. So put a dot right here. Let's go ahead and press on start debugging, and let's put 1. Let's put a 1.1, and let's put a 3. So you can see right here it's actually 1.1000 all the way until 1. The dnum3 is not done yet, and the dnum1 is a 1.0s. So it is different. So we can go press on this one, step over, and I put 3 in there, so it will show you that 3.0s all the way. And that takes quite a lot of characters. To close it, just press on the stop right here. It takes a lot of memory. In today's world, we don't have to deal with that a lot because we have so much memory. But if you are going to be a programmer for phones or whatnot, you need to care for these things. So what we're gonna do is use a different one, which is a float. A float is smaller than a double, just by a little bit, and we're gonna call them fnum1 equal 0.0, just the same as doubles, but put an f right at the end. This will make sure it's only 0.0, nothing more, nothing higher, comma fnum2 and equals 0.00 f. We can put 2 zeros in there, and then fnum3 equals 0.00 and f, and close it. So let's go ahead and change all of those, and just an easier way, Control F will show you this thing for the find and replace, and go to quick find and replace and type dnum and replace it with fnum, and find next, replace all, and we have replaced the wrong ones right now. So let's go ahead and copy that, and I'm going to change those, but that's much easier than going to every one of them and replacing it. So we have replaced those, and let's go ahead and run it. So go to debug, start without debugging. You will see that asks you for fnum1, so let's go ahead and just type 1. For fnum2, let's do 1.111. That's 3, because in here it says only 2, but we've input 3, so let's see what that does. And for the last one, we can do 1.1, and it displays exactly what we've inputted. 1.111 is the same here. So let's go ahead and close it, and I'm going to put a debugging right here and press it to show you the exact output. 1.1, 1.111, 1. Or just 1. Let's do for this one. So in here it's actually zeros in here, so it doesn't use too much of it. It doesn't use too much. That's the dnum. For the fnum, it's not using too much of it. You see it's using much less digits. See that? And right here it's using much less. So that's a much easier way to use and softer for your software and program. So let's go ahead and close it, stop debugging, and get this off. So I'm going to introduce you to characters. Characters are different than integers, doubles, and floats. Those three are for numbers. Characters are for letters, as it says character, and it's spelled as char. It's also blue and highlighted, and as usual you can do let's call it just char with a cap. That isn't really a good variable name, so let's go ahead and call it word, or in this case letter, because if you do char again, it's a reserved word and you cannot use that. So let's call it letter 1 equal 1 quote space 1 quote, and end it with a semicolon. The reason for 1 quote is because it's a character. You have to use 1 quote, not double quote. So let's go ahead and do another one. Letter 2 equal quote space quote, and then same thing with letter 3 equal quote quote. This is the way to initialize characters, because you cannot just do quote quote. It will give you an error, and the error would say quote string should contain at least 1 character. So let's go ahead and do space. That will be initialized. So in here, let's do the same thing as we did before. Letter 1, let's put it right in here. Letter 1, letter 2, and letter 3. And for these, the same thing. Letter 1, letter 2, and letter 3. So let's go ahead and run it. I'm going to change the output. You don't have to. You don't care for it. This is just a tutorial for these things. And let's go ahead and debug. Start without debugging. And we have please input letter 1. Let's go ahead and input letter 1. Just 1 character. So Y. And then for a second letter M. And for a third letter C. It appears that we have misspelled something in here, because it's only displaying C and M. It's not displaying letter 1. The reason for that is because we have put letter 1 right in here, so we're going to go ahead and change that. And that's one of the many errors that you'll see, and even I forget about it, even though I've been coding for a whole year with C++. I forget about these little things. So let's go ahead and close it, and this time I will debug it. So let's put a dot right here, start without debugging. And don't worry if you don't understand the debugging so far, I will explain it much in detail later. Just go ahead and do Y, M, and C, and in here you'll be able to see that letter 1 is a Y, which is an 89 in the ASCII table, and letter 3 is a C, which is 67 in the ASCII table, and letter 2 is an M, which is 77 in the ASCII table. If you don't know the ASCII table, you go to your internet browser and go to Google and just type ASCII Table. Doesn't matter how you spell it. Just go ahead and click on that and go ahead on one of the tables. So right in here you'll be able to see the ASCII table, which is whatever character that we use is put in decimal, hex and octa and HTML. So we use decimal mostly. So all of it is right in here, and you can see that M is 109 right here, but capital M is 77, and you can see all of it in here. So let's go ahead and close that and go back to our program, and I'll show you one of the errors that most people use and deal with, which is Control F5. Let's compile it. Which is what they do is think it's like a string and do YMC, but it's only one character, so it only takes one. So let's put enter, and it runs the whole thing. The reason for that is because you've put YMC. What this did, C in letter, which is one character, so it took the Y and it displayed that, and C in letter 2, but the M is still hanging, so it will take it. So letter 3 will take the C, and you'll be displaying everything, because they're both waiting for something to be displayed. And please remember, you cannot compile like this. If you do compile again, usually it will give you an error because you already have another compiler open like that, and you do something and then compile it again, it will give you an error like this one, something like this. So don't do that. Try make sure that you close the console before you do anything else. So while we have it open, I'll show you another error that people usually mistaken is YMCA. Let's type that, but we only have 3 CNs. So let's go ahead and press enter, and we have YMC, but the A is lost in there. So don't do any of that. Make sure that if it's one character, make sure it's one input there only. So go ahead and close that. And now we're gonna introduce you to strings. Strings go like this. String, just like that, just like you say it, but it is not highlighted in blue because it is not a class. It's I believe a function. I'm not sure which is which, but it's not highlighted in blue, but it's still a reserved word. You define it as you define the rest, which is let's say word1 equal. Now this is different. The initialization of it is double quotes, that's it. And then let's initialize another one, word2, and equals to double quotes, and then same thing with word3 equals double quotes, semicolon. That's why it's different from the character. And to display it or do an input, we're gonna do this: word1, word2, word3. Then same thing with this one, word1, word2, word3. So let's go ahead and run this. And before we run it, we have these errors. It will not tell you the correct error. It will tell you no operator matches these operands. That's because a string uses a different library. So in the libraries is this: we are only using IOStream, which lets us use cout and cin. So we have to use a string library, which is include stri, and then you'd have it highlighted right in there. Click it, or you can type it and end it with a higher than, and the errors will be gone. So let's go ahead and run this. Debug, start without debugging, and we have a program. So let's go ahead and I forgot to change the output, we'll change it later. Let's go ahead and type let's do YMCA. It will accept it and only one, because word is a string and strings accepts more than one character but without a space. Now this is the same error that we got into characters. If you do for example my name is Aziz, and you put an enter, it will accept Azam in the second word and Aziz in the third one, and it would display it. So don't do that. Make sure that you don't do that. I will introduce you to functions later if you want to do a full name, so we're not going to do it today, but this is what we have for today. Just like we said before, integers, you have to always remember this. Do the class wherever you want to make it to, and then identify it, then initialize it, and then for inputs and outputs, just like this, nothing different. Anything you want to use, always look at this and you'll be fine. That's it, the end of the tutorial. I hope I'll see you next time. If you have any questions at all, visit our website, indidevelopment.co, not .com, or you can ask on YouTube. It's just better on our website because we have in the forums. I can post the code to you. You can download the solution from there also. And please like and subscribe. Have a good day.